Hey, what's up, you guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Business Inside Out podcast with me as your host. I am Dr. Daniel Kimbley, as you know, and this is what I want to talk about this week. On the podcast, I have often, I'm regularly contemplating, what can I share with you guys? How can I create more value? How can I help you uplift your business? Because ultimately what I know is I went through a journey in the first couple years of practice where I was a little bit frustrated. I felt like there were things that had to be done a certain way, which actually wasn't true. And so realistically, as I start thinking about it and I start, brainstorming topics for the podcast, one of the biggest things that came up for me is I had to look back on my journey. And some of you have heard this if you've seen videos, but there was a point in practice where I had made in a year, we did revenue that was bigger than any number I had ever seen or even contemplated making in my life. And I came from a high school English teaching background, but there was this point where I'm like, oh my gosh, dude, we collected a lot of money this year. Now looking back on it, it wasn't a lot of money, but for a starting point, it was more money than I'd ever made. And I had to become a different person. I had to have a different mindset. I had to do all these different things to get myself to the point where we are now. But the point of it is that it's not about me, except for it is about me because I want to share my journey with you just a little bit. So first year, more collections than I could have ever thought that we did. We did it in 9 months. And what I realized is we're still broke. And part of the reason that we were broke is because I feel like we could have seen way more people that ended up just not committing to us. And I had somebody reach out to me on Instagram recently, and they're like, our office is crushing, dude. We're doing so good, everything's so good, and we're struggling with all these people leaving that just ghost us. So we do a report of findings, and they get adjusted one time, and then we never hear from them again. To me, that's a problem, right? And I struggle with the same thing. It's I would be yeah, we'll just adjust you and then you decide about the finances and whatever. So this is the topic of the podcast, is not to talk about care plans and financing and money and all those things, but what I really want to talk about is just because you don't see it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Just because you don't know that it's there doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And so for the conversation of the person I was talking about on Instagram, one of the things that I know is there are for sure 100%, I don't even have to step into their practice to know that there are things that they are doing that are unspoken, that are unsaid, that are turning people away. And it has to do with the conversation of how you set up rules by which people play your game inside of your practice. This is a concept called framing. And I'm not going to share the concept of framing with you because it's one of the things that I teach inside of my program. But the idea is there are things that are happening to you in communication, in the way that you set up your office every single day, whether you like to believe that they are there or not. I can guarantee you that they are. And they are either allowing you to crush it massively, or it is creating a leak within your practice that you don't even know exists because you don't understand this concept of framing and what it actually means to set up a context by which people play by your rules, by which people opt into or opt out of the care that you provide. And so when we think about this idea, where are places, I would just have you consider this question, where are places for you where you feel like people aren't necessarily doing it exactly like you would want it to be done? When I say people, I'm talking about clients and patients inside of your practice. Where do you feel like your biggest struggles are? And just take a moment and reflect on that. Is where are those? Because I guarantee you there are things, whether you know it or not, that are preventing you from being super successful. One of the biggest things, I'll share an example with you. This is outside of the chiropractic world, but I think it's so interesting and it makes such the case for doing care plans with people. And again, this is not about the money, right? This is about getting people results. And I tell people this all the time, we turn people down who want to just get adjusted one time, because I would rather not have their $100 and then have them commit to a plan and full on get massive results and change inside of their life, because that's what we're after. And I know that's what they're after. They're not just looking for a quick fix, because if they were, they would just buy a bottle of Tylenol. You've heard me talk about this on other episodes of the podcast. So anyway, the reason I share that with you is because this is we have a process by which we turn people down who are not good fits for our office. And we do it for a number of reasons, but part of it is we're setting up this context for how people play by our rules or not. Think of my wife and I, we went to Dave & Buster's, right? So this is the example outside of the chiropractic space. My wife and I went to Dave & Buster's this weekend for our date night. Now, I know that sounds crazy and silly, but it was actually an insane amount of fun. I haven't played video games in a long time, and then, we were like throwing footballs and playing dodgeball and like doing all this fun stuff. And the cool part about Dave & Buster's is I realized, like, in this moment, I thought about this idea that Dave & Buster's literally, like Heather and I each paid, we had to pay for separate cards, right? So we could swipe our cards. The cards, not necessarily cheap, by the way, but we each decided, like, hey, the best value is to get like 275 tokens. We weren't going to be there that long, so we each got 275 tokens. So we get them on these cards. We're playing, and the girl told us, she's like, yeah, like about 200 is what somebody would usually do in an hour and a half before they leave. So we get them. Well, we get them playing. We have to go to dinner, and we have like 100 tokens left each on our cards. And in that moment, I was like, dang, dude, we just paid money for a service that we will not be using for who knows how long. And it really got me thinking, like, there's a business model and a business strategy behind gift cards. I never knew it existed before, but I think about all the gift cards I've ever had in my life where I'm like, oh, there's only $1.50 on that card, I'm just going to throw it in the trash. Like, the company got that money, and they didn't have to service anything for it. So the reason I share this with you is just to give you and illustrate that concept of, like, there are things inside of your business. Context, psychological context of framing being one of those. Another context of, like, how people enter your office and sit in your space. Like, what does it say about you? It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter what the thing is, but what does it say about you if your trash can's overflowing? What does it say about you if you tell people that you're going to record a podcast, and then you record 3 episodes of the podcast, and then you stop doing it for months, and then you come back and you say you're going to do it again, and then you stop doing it, or you say you're going to post on social media every day, but then you post once every other week? Like, people look to you as a doctor for consistency. And you may have never considered this before, but I'm going to have you consider that if you're asking people to commit to you to do something repeatedly, over and over again, I want you to come every week, I want you to do it for 6 months, I want you to come twice a week, I want you to do it for 6 months, whatever the recommendations are for you, like, are you holding yourself to that same standard? And what I see oftentimes, the answer to that for most chiros is no. Like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not posting every day. No, I'm not doing the thing that I said I would do every day. And then you wonder why people don't want to commit to you, or why people ghost you. And, like, I'm not saying that was the case for this person who reached out to me on Instagram, but what I am saying is there are a bunch of things that are unspoken that communicate who you are, how you will show up, why you will show up, when you will show up, and then it is all a reflection of how people show back up to you. So if you're frustrated with people ghosting you, as this person was, I would have them consider that there are frameworks and things inside of their practice that are encouraging people to ghost them based on what they say that is different or a disconnect from what they do. And what this ultimately comes down to is really just being a person of your word. Like, I could give you so many examples. There are so many things that we run through inside of the Nexus method and the programs that I teach to other chiropractors to be able to, it's not systems, right? It's systems of communication that allow you to step up and be the authority so people trust you more. But, like, most people don't even look at their day one. They're like, they have a script and they look at it, and then they never consider that there may be other things that are actually turning people away, or that are encouraging people who are the wrong fits to stay with them, which I would argue is even more important. There are things that happen, there are conversations, there are words that are used in day ones and day twos that can completely turn someone off to ever wanting to get under care with you. There is a very specific way by which you can build attention, someone's attention, to pay attention to you, to trust you, to actually listen to you and be all in on every word that you're saying, that comes from you being able to build tension and desire with someone. You being able to speak in a certain way that allows somebody's brain to release dopamine, and that allows someone's brain to release norepinephrine, and those two things together create attention for someone to pay attention to you. And it's so subtle, but it's so missed. And so my encouragement for you is, like, are there places, regardless of whether you have the best systems, regardless of whatever practice management you use, like, are there things that you are doing as a person that are preventing you from getting people the results that you know that they want and they need inside of their life? Because ultimately what this comes down to is us being the best version of ourselves so that we can show up for the people who we care about most inside of our practices. And when we show up at the highest level, because we have the highest expectation for ourselves, because we understand and we've started to think about things that we didn't even think about before and didn't even realize existed before, that were turning people away or not allowing people to get results or allowing people to think that chiropractors are quacks and that chiropractic couldn't work. And when we hold ourselves to a different standard, that requires them to hold themselves to a different standard. It requires them to get a different level of results, and that's what we're after with people, is allowing them to get the highest level version of results, like we experienced when we started using chiropractic care for ourselves. And you can't do it unless you sit down and you take an assessment and you analyze and you figure out, where exactly in my practice are things happening that I am completely unaware of? Is your trash can overflowing? Is there always that one spider web up in the corner that you haven't cleaned for the last 15 weeks? Like, what does that say about you or your team as people? Like, who show up, and your attention to detail and your attention to caring, and like, it's no judgment, right? It's just, I'm super OCD and picky because I think in my head that those things are a reflection of me as a person. And when our trash cans are overflowing, like, we have a system in place to make sure that our trash cans never overflow in our office. Why? Because we want people to have the best experience possible, because that's what allows us to hold them to a higher standard, to ask them to commit to something because they know that what they're committing to is excellence, like us getting them the best results that we could possibly get them. And if you don't hold yourself to that same standard, then you can't hold anybody else to it. So my friends, where in your practice are you unaware of things that you're doing? Like, are you unaware of how you're setting up the conversation? Are you unaware of your language? Like, for me, one of the biggest things is I used to tell people, I think we could probably, maybe, possibly, we might be able to help you with that. My language had to shift, because what I know is that we can. Like, we 100% can help you with that. And that difference, it's as subtle, most people are so unaware of it, but they say things like that, that minimize what they do, how we do it, who they are as people, and then they wonder why, like, well, why'd somebody ghost us? Or why won't this person commit to care? Or why does everybody say it's too expensive? Or everybody says they need to talk to their spouse, but then they end up just never reaching back out to us, and even to tell us no. It's like, where does that come from? I can tell you where I think it comes from. It comes from a level of you not being aware of exactly what's happening in your business. And sure, you may have the best systems all day long, but there are very specific frameworks of communication. There are very specific frameworks of psychology. There are very specific frameworks of a day one and a day two, regardless of the words you use, but ways that you can set things up to build more trust and build more authority with people. And my friends, that's all I have for you on this episode. If you got some value out of this and you are interested in finding those holes in the blind spots inside of your business, I have a special invite for you. Here in a few weeks, I'm launching another version of the 90-day sprint that I have done multiple times before with multiple chiros and helped them achieve well over 100K in income. As a result, I'm talking about added income, not just income in general, as a result of joining up in this program. If you are interested, I would just encourage you to schedule a call with me. You can do it. I'll leave a link in the show notes. You can reach out to me, DM me on Facebook, Instagram, whatever. I would love to support you because I know there are so many people just like I who my first year in practice thought I was crushing it, more money than I ever made, and I realized that there was so much money that I left on the table. There's so many more people that I could have served that I wasn't able to serve because I had the wrong frameworks, because I had the wrong things in the back of my head. I was unaware of so many things about practice and the way business runs and the way that we communicate and the way that people think and the way that people make decisions. And when you can start to understand those at a deep level and you can start to care at the deepest level possible, I guarantee your practice will transform like that. It doesn't take you getting a new EHR system. It doesn't take you getting a new adjusting technique. It doesn't take you changing your practice management system or the way that you flow people through your office. It takes you becoming aware of the blind spots of things that I don't see anybody else in the chiropractic space talking about. So my friends, if you're interested in that Nexus Method 90-day sprint, I would love for you to reach out to me. And that's all I got for you. I love you. I appreciate you. And I will come at you again next week. As always, peace.